There is one thing happening in your brain tonight, right now, as you sit here, that almost nobody talks about. And if you are over 60 and you are not correcting it before you go to sleep, you are losing something you will never get back. My name is Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara. I have been practicing neurology and geriatric medicine in Kyoto for 43 years. I am 91 years old. And I want to tell you something that most neurologists do not say clearly enough. Not because they don't know it, but because the system does not always leave room for it. I started making these videos because of a woman named Chiyo. She was 72, sharp as anyone I had ever met, retired professor, read voraciously, remembered everything. She came to me not because she felt something was wrong. She came because her daughter was worried. Said her mother seemed a little slower in the mornings, a little less herself.
The scans told us things we could no longer undo. Not catastrophically, but there was loss, real, measurable loss. And when I looked at Chiyo's sleep history, her evening habits, what she had been doing and not doing before bed every night for 20 years, I understood exactly what had happened, and I understood that no one had ever told her. That is why I am here. She never blamed anyone, but I have carried her chart in the back of my mind ever since. What I am going to explain to you tonight involves 3 things your brain desperately needs before you sleep, and 3 things it is almost certainly fighting against. All of them are quiet. None of them feel serious. That is exactly what makes them dangerous. Let us begin with something most people think they understand, because they do not. Your brain produces waste every single day. Every thought you have, every memory you form, every word you read, including these, generates metabolic byproducts, proteins, cellular debris, things that must be cleared out or they accumulate. There is a system in your brain called the glymphatic system. Think of it like the cleaning crew that comes into a building every night after everyone goes home. They sweep, they remove, they reset. But here's the thing, they only work when the lights are out. They only work when you are in deep sleep. And after 60, this system becomes significantly less efficient. Research published in Science showed that during deep non-REM sleep, cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain at a rate that can clear up to 60% more waste than during waking hours. Other work from the University of Rochester found that this process is directly tied to sleep timing, not just duration. It is not simply how long you sleep, it is when. Most people over 60 go to bed later than their bodies actually want. They push through the tiredness. They watch one more hour. They scroll. They think, I'll make up for it on the weekend. And every night they delay, the cleaning crew shows up to a building that is still occupied. They cannot do their job. The waste sits. I always explain it to patients this way. Imagine your kitchen after a large dinner. You can leave those dishes until morning, once, maybe twice. But if you do it every single night for years, there comes a point where the residue is not just on the plates, it is in the walls. This is not a metaphor I invented for convenience. This is what we now understand about amyloid beta accumulation in the aging brain, the same protein associated with cognitive decline. The National Institute on Aging has confirmed that poor sleep in midlife and beyond is one of the strongest modifiable risk factors for dementia. Not the only one, but one of the most avoidable. The first thing to correct, tonight, is your sleep timing. Not dramatically. Even 15 to 20 minutes earlier than your current bedtime matters. Your glymphatic system has a window. Respect it. But here is where it gets more complicated. Because even if you go to bed at the right time, what happens in the hour before you lie down may be undermining everything. Your brain's ability to enter deep, restorative sleep is governed by melatonin, but not in the simple way most people think. It is not about darkness at bedtime. It is about what happens 2 to 3 hours before. The light your eyes take in during that window directly suppresses melatonin production. And the specific wavelength that causes the most suppression is blue light, the kind emitted by every phone screen, every tablet, every television in your home. Think of it like trying to fall asleep with someone shining a flashlight directly into your eyes. You might eventually drift off, but the quality of what follows is compromised from the start. A 2014 study in PNAS by researchers at Harvard and Brigham and Women's Hospital found that evening exposure to blue light emitting screens delayed melatonin onset by 1.5 hours, reduced REM sleep, and left participants feeling more fatigued the following morning, even after 8 hours in bed. 8 hours, still fatigued, because it is not just about time, it is about depth. After 60, melatonin production is already declining. The pineal gland, the structure responsible for its release, calcifies with age. Its output drops. What used to require significant light interference to suppress now requires very little. Your aging brain is more vulnerable to this disruption than it has ever been, and most people have absolutely no idea. I am not telling you to throw your phone away. I am telling you to put it down 90 minutes before you sleep. If that sounds extreme, start with 30, then 45, then work toward 90. Your brain will tell you the difference within a week. Pay careful attention to this next part. This is the one I have never seen explained clearly in a patient brochure, and it is, I believe, the most important of the three. When you finally lie down at night, when the house is quiet, the lights are off, and there is nothing left to do, a great many people find that this is precisely when their mind begins to race. Worries, replays of conversations, things undone, tomorrow's problems, yesterday's regrets. This is not a weakness. This is not anxiety in the clinical sense for most people. This is cortisol, your primary stress hormone, behaving in a pattern that has become deeply ingrained. Here is what happens in the aging brain specifically. Cortisol regulation becomes less precise after 60. The feedback loops that used to dampen cortisol production in the evening become sluggish. So the cortisol that should be falling, preparing your system for rest, lingers. And when you lie down in the silence, with nothing to distract your nervous system, that lingering cortisol finds the thoughts you have been pushing away all day, and it amplifies them. It does not hit you during the day when you are busy. It waits until you are lying in the dark, the room still, and there is nothing left between you and your own mind. That is when it arrives. Research from the Journal of Neuroscience has shown that elevated evening cortisol in older adults is directly associated with reduced hippocampal volume, the hippocampus being the brain structure most central to memory formation and retrieval. This is not a subtle finding. Repeated elevation of cortisol before sleep, over months and years, physically changes the structure of the memory center. Let that sit for a moment. Not a decline in function, a measurable reduction in volume, in the part of the brain you depend on to remember names, faces, where you put your keys, and far more important things than that. The practical intervention here is not meditation, though that can help. It is what I call a cortisol buffer, a deliberate transition period in the final 60 minutes before sleep. No news, no email, no financial decisions, no difficult conversations. Instead, something that occupies the mind gently without stimulating it. A book, slow music, gentle stretching, even a warm bath. The drop in core temperature that follows actually signals your brain that sleep is approaching. These are not suggestions. These are interventions backed by decades of research on autonomic nervous system regulation. The Mayo Clinic and National Sleep Foundation both list pre-sleep routine as among the highest yield lifestyle changes for cognitive preservation in older adults. I want to ask you something honestly. Of these three things, sleep timing, evening light, cortisol buffer, which one do you think is your weakest? Just think about it for a moment. If one of these descriptions sounded more personal than the others, that is probably the one your brain is asking you to address first. If you feel comfortable, type it in the comments. I genuinely read them, and sometimes what you share helps me decide what to cover next. I want to be honest with you about what I have seen when all three of these go uncorrected, not for one night or 1 week, but for years. The early signs are easy to dismiss. Slower word retrieval, needing to reread a paragraph, walking into a room and forgetting why. These feel like ordinary aging, and sometimes they are, but sometimes they are the first readable signals of a system under sustained pressure. The mid-stage signs are harder to explain away. Difficulty with tasks that once felt automatic, following a complex conversation, managing multiple things at once, retaining new information. The brain compensates cleverly for a long time. It finds workarounds. So the person experiencing this often does not notice. The people around them do. And the late consequences, I will not dramatize them, because you already know what they are, and because they do not always come. But the Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention estimates that up to 40% of dementia cases worldwide are potentially attributable to modifiable risk factors. Sleep quality is now considered one of the most significant of those factors in later life. Not inevitable, not guaranteed, but not neutral either. Remember Chiyo, the woman I mentioned at the very beginning, the retired professor whose daughter brought her in? When I looked at what her evenings had looked like for the past decade, late to bed, phone in hand until midnight, a mind that never fully quieted, I could trace almost every finding on her scan back to the habits she had no idea were costing her anything. She had done everything else right: diet, exercise, social engagement. I do not share her story to frighten you. I shared it because she deserved to know. Earlier, when the information could have made a larger difference. And the truth is, no one failed her dramatically. She simply fell through a gap that exists for millions of people. The gap between what medicine knows and what patients are told in the time available during a routine appointment. These videos exist to fill that gap. That is all they are. So here is what I want you to do. Not all at once, just begin. First, look at what time you are going to bed tonight and move it 15 minutes earlier. Just 15. That is not a sacrifice. That is a beginning. Second, identify what you are doing in the 90 minutes before sleep and ask honestly whether any of it is emitting blue light or activating your stress response. You do not have to eliminate it entirely, but reduce it deliberately. Third, create a 30-minute window before you lie down that belongs to nothing urgent. No problem solving. No screens. Let your nervous system begin to downshift before you ask it to sleep. You will notice the difference within days. None of this requires a prescription. None of it requires a specialist. It requires only that you take the hour before sleep as seriously as you take the rest of your health. Because it is not separate from the rest of your health. It is the foundation of it. If someone you know is over 60 and has never thought about this, a parent, a sibling, a friend, please share this with them. Not to alarm them, just to give them what they may not have been given. Sometimes that is the most useful thing one person can do for another. Chiyo, when I last saw her, 3 years after that first visit, told me something I have thought about often. She said she wished someone had sat down with her, not handed her a pamphlet, but actually sat with her and explained what her brain needed at night. She said she would have listened. She always would have listened. I believe you will too. Tonight, before the lights go out, take 15 minutes for your brain. It has been working for you without pause for every year of your life. Give it what it needs to keep going. You are not too late. But tonight matters.